on. You said that's what you wanted. You guys talk about your marches, the Black Lives Matter march, where some women who don't believe in marriage, don't believe in family, aren't heterosexual women that give a fuck about any of that. Y'all sitting up fighting for racism, patriarchy, toxic masculinity, the fucking war in Ukraine. You fighting everybody in the goddamn world and you want credit from your men for doing that. We don't need you to fucking march. We want you to be a wife, but that doesn't serve your ego. So you don't want to do that. And that's fine. That's your choice. But the men are not asking you to march. You want to know why? Because the men that are getting killed are your sons. They're your fatherless sons. They're your fatherless sons. They're not men like me. They're not men like leadership. We're not the ones. I'm not saying it never happens to us, but the guys that you guys are marching for are your sons. Men that were raised without other men to socialize them toward manhood. Men who got their testosterone, which makes you aggressive, gives you a high libido, and makes you competitive and gives you a little bit of an ego where you want to compete against people. And so you need another man to teach you restraint. You have to have a man to teach you restraint, to teach you that your aggression under restraint and moderation and discipline becomes protection for women and children. A man teaches you how to do that. You get on the wrestling mat and you fight for your life on that wrestling mat. You get in the ring and you fight for your life in that ring. You get on the court and you play your heart out. You get on the field and you fight your life out. And when that whistle blows, you stop. You turn it off. 1 minute you're trying to tear the guy's head up, the whistle blows, you stop. You know why? Because you're practicing being able to turn off and on your aggression so that you can be in control of it. You ladies don't understand how men need that. You don't know what you're doing. You're complaining about the men you are raising. You're not complaining about my old patriarchal ass, because I don't have a problem keeping my hands off of women, and I don't give a shit if you tell me no or not. I'll keep it moving. The men you are complaining about are the men you are raising. The men who are filling up the prisons, the men who are filling up the mental institutions, 90% of the men who rape women, alcoholics, drug addicts, all the dregs of society, every single negative metric that we measure in society, these men have one thing in common. They're raised by women who are single, independent, and don't need a man. They're raised by multiple baby mamas. They're raised by women who say they want a man, but don't need a man. They're raised by women who say their body count don't matter. So that's fine. You don't give a shit what husbands want? No problem. That's your choice. I accept that. But you can't be a maverick, completely divorce yourself from men, but then when it's time for somebody to die, you're looking for somebody else to put their ass and nuts on the line. When I was in the service, there was a New Year's party. I was out in Oklahoma. And there was a woman, and I was in my early 20s. I was raised by a single mother. My mother wasn't a baby mama. She was a divorcee. So anyways, this woman is getting into an argument with her man because she was dancing with some other dude in the club. And he caught her. They get into it. He pushes her down on the ground. I come over, Super Sim style, chest out. Man, what you doing? Man, this ain't none of your business. Him and I ended up getting into it. They threw him out, not me. Now, I came there with two of my boys, and both of them weren't small men. One of them, 6'4", played for Mizzou, not a small man, right? My other dude, just same height as me. We military. All we do is lift. We come out the door. Old boy is there with like 7 of his dudes. I'm lucky they didn't pop the trunk, that they ain't have that going on. And guess who was standing right next to the dude? You guessed it, the chick that I was defending. Now, when he saw me come out with them other 2 boys, them 7 dudes realized they didn't want that problem. And they did a whole bunch of barking and the shit acquiesced. But the point is I jumped into some shit and she's sitting up there, she fucking them that night. Men are tired of this type of shit. And then the woman, you heard the one woman on the panel, she said, well, if my dad would have got deleted jumping into a situation like this, I'd be okay with that. Another woman was like, yeah, if a young man got deleted, but he was sticking up for a woman, at least he died doing the right. Y'all don't give a shit about us. Y'all don't give a shit about our lives. Y'all don't give a shit about our lives. That Black Lives Matter shit had people confused for like 1 second. Y'all don't give a shit about that. Was a money grab. These marches and shit, y'all ain't doing what we ask. We asking y'all to be wise. We asking for you to protect your home. We asking you to get married before you fucking have some kids. Ain't nobody asking you to march. Let me tell you something. If you a woman, you got multiple kids by multiple men, let me tell you something. If you a woman and you got multiple kids by multiple men, and they're irresponsible men that you say ain't shit, I don't give a fuck how many marches you go to. You can't help the community more than you've hurt them by the way that you've lived your life. Because you're completing an archetype. You guys ever heard of Lilith before? You know who Lilith is? She was Adam's first wife. You can look this up in the rabbinic text. And so Lilith, God made Adam. This is just the Garden of Eden is an allegory to talk about natural order. So whether you're Christian or not, it doesn't matter. Just think about this as a story. I'm not asking you to believe in God. I'm asking for you to understand the concept. So God made Adam and Lilith right next to each other. He didn't make Lilith out of Adam's rib. She wasn't made to submit to Adam. And so she didn't want to cooperate in the garden. She talked directly to God, and so did Adam. She didn't want to cooperate in the garden. So Adam and her, they got into it so much. He was like, man, I cannot deal with her, man. You got to get rid of her. God was like, all right, cool. I see you guys ain't getting along. I'm an ouster. You're right. She doing the most. So he kicks her out of the garden. And so Lilith mates with all the unborn things of the land and eventually becomes Satan's wife. You can look the story up. And her children, her offspring, are all the monsters that devil mankind. This is an allegory. It's a story to talk about combative women who exist outside of cooperation with men. She's an archetype. And the archetype of her that they wrote about in pre-rabbinic text or in pre-biblical text in a rabbinic text about her, and you guys can Google this and look this up, is saying that women who refuse to cooperate with men will have children by men that nobody fucking respects, by monsters. And they'll birth people who grow up and eat the whole society. And that's why when you watch who it is, how these young men are raised, you're saying, oh, these men need therapy. They have to feel like something is wrong with them or give a shit that something is for them to get therapy. They don't give a shit. They don't give a shit. They was raised their whole life hearing that they wasn't a motherfucking thing. I hate you. You look just like your daddy. With all this crazy shit. That's what they were raised up hearing. These men, a man who would attack a woman for telling him no, is obviously a psychopath. Can we agree on that, ladies? We can agree on that, right? He's obviously a psychopath, right? So I bet you $1 to a bag of donuts he wasn't socialized to manhood by a black man. I bet you $1 to a bag of donuts, if we looked up how he was raised, we will find a history of trauma, neglect, and abuse. And the person who raised him will be a woman that tells you her body count don't matter. She's single, she independent, she don't need a man. She want a man, but she definitely don't need a fucking man. And marriage is just a white supremacist patriarchal concept meant to oppress women. What the fuck do you think would happen if look, you've been saying this independent shit for 50 years. You've been saying it for 50 years. It wasn't put onto you by somebody else. You can scroll through TikTok, you still hear women saying this shit. What did you think it would look like to be independent? What did you think it would look like to remove yourself from your men? You act like you're so much more educated than black men. 24% of you have bachelor's degrees. 19% of the men do. That's 5%. All the white supremacist talking points I hear trying to diminish black men come out of the mouths of black women. That's what I hear personally. That is my experience. I always get up and I'll ask people, how many black men do you think are in jail? Women will tell me 40%, 60%, 80%. There's 2.2 million prisoners in state and federal in the entire country. 2.2 million. Black people are 34% of that. And that's high. That's high. And 90% of those black people are men. That's high. Because we only represent about 14% of the country's population, black men, black people, black men and women and children. Right? So if we're only 14% of the country's population, but we're 34% of the country's prison population, that's more than double. That's crazy. That's a problem. But what is 34% of 2.2 million? It's about 850,000. And then when you deduct the over 10% that are women, you get about 690,000. How many black men are there in America? There's 42 million black people in America. 19 million of them are men. That's less than 3% of the men, ladies. We ain't all in jail. 3% of the men are in prison. Look it up. 3% of the men are in prison. Look it up. 80% of black men will never go to jail ever in their lives. 80% of black men will never go to jail ever in their lives. Ever. But when I sit up and I talk about these things, the women are telling me that the prison industrial complex is swallowed up all the fathers out of the hood. And that's why the women had a whole bunch of babies by a handful of dudes. That's why they marry before they carry. Or the men are gay. Less than 6% of black men identify on the LGBTQIA spectrum. But y'all telling the world we gay. Y'all telling the whole world that we're in jail or we're gay. That's what y'all been telling the whole world for the last 50 years. The white man don't have to say nothing negative about us. You got it. You got it. And so you've been telling your men for 50 years you don't need you, that we don't need you. What do you think that looks like when it comes to you getting jumped on in front of the men that you say you don't need? What do you think that looks like? Now, I'm not saying all the women say this shit, but it's the majority of you, and it's definitely the dominant narrative. The dominant